Namato Ratanatayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello everyone, good evening. So today is Friday the 25th of September in the 2020, and this is Ajahn Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center, Aberdeen, Scotland. So I'm here with you tonight again, and you may notice I am becoming little fat today because wearing too many layers because of the cold. So suddenly we were having a wonderful sunshine and a warm weather, and not even wearing proper clothes, but now suddenly weather changed and now wearing so many layers of clothes. So you may see me a little fat. It's not because I eat more. It's because the weather. Okay, so this is the winter coming. Hopefully we are ready for that. Nobody likes the winter, but we have to face it. It's like a life. It's always ups and downs, like the weather always changes. Some days there are a few months there's sunshine and the wonderful weather, and then again entering into the winter time. So this is a changing nature. And today again I'm going to focus on the ongoing talk on particularly the third Satipatthana, the Cittanupassana, that I have been talking through, and which is the section from the right mindfulness. And the right mindfulness again comes under the Eightfold Noble Path, and so which is on the base of the this first discourse of the Buddha. So Cittanupassana, that I was talking about it a couple of nights now, and yesterday I gave a little bit of details on it, that how and which way one should be mindful. But the most important thing is non-reactive awareness to the things that arises in our minds, and that is the important one, and the rest is fine. And even when we look at the Satipatthana Sutta, we can see that Cittanupassana is the one of the shortest among the other four contemplations. So Cittanupassana is a short yet very important, because whatever we do, whatever we say, whatever we think, the mind is always at the front, and it is the chief. That's why in the Dhammapada, the first Gatha stanza says that the mind is a forerunner and he is the chief. On the base of that, whatever one does, the fruit or the consequences one has to face. If one does good, the consequences is good. If one does bad, the consequences will be bad. So this is again based on that. Okay. Meanwhile, mind is also one of the very subtle and difficult object to understand. From this, when we look at the Buddha's teachings, all what we are practicing, Buddha's teachings and meditation, is nothing more than understanding our own mind and knowing how this is conditioned. And the mind, according to the Buddha's teachings, it's a combination of two things: the mind and so-called cetasikas, the mental factors. Where mental factors is, and when we look at the five aggregates, that's Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, known as the mental factors. So Vedana is a feeling, Sanya is the perception, and the Sankhara is a karma formation. So these three are regarded as the mental factors or the cetasikas. And the consciousness is known as the mind. So this mind again always related or dependent on something to arise. And this is what we have to realize, and this is what we have to understand. And the very moment once we have understood and able to control this mind, then everything will be fine. Otherwise, everything becomes tangled, everything becomes troubled and unable to tackle it. Like there was a monk who, there was a businessman who was very devoted to the venerable monks and always give a dana, and hoping to get a comfortable life in this life as well as in the future lives. And he was always giving a dana, and somehow he wanted to ask more what is going to be, getting more merits. So he asked the venerable monks that what else he can do to gain more merits. And he was told to observe 5 precepts. And he observed the 5 precepts. And then later on, after practicing 5 precepts without any violations, he wanted to know that is there any other practices that one can do to get the more merits. And the venerable monks introduced him to become a monk. So then with this thought of getting more merits, he gave up his worldly life and then become a Buddhist monk. And then as soon as he became a Buddhist monk, and he had to learn all the rules and the regulations that this is you cannot do, that is you cannot do, and so many. And now for the bhikkhus or the monks' rule, there are 227 major rules. It's called the Patimokkha. When he was taught this Patimokkha, he felt like he cannot do anything. It's like imprisoned by the rules, and with that he wasn't able to concentrate, and he wasn't able to be happy, and he thought that this is not the path. If I am a lay person, I have more freedom to do, and I can offer a dana, and I can practice the sila, and I am much happier than being a monk and following all these rules, 2027 rules. And then with that in mind, so he was just kept thinking of giving up being a monk. And then one night and one day, and normally we know that from the records it is said that the Buddha always go into the meditation early morning. It's called samapati jhanas, right? So he normally goes into the jhanas, practice and meditating, and then looking at that today who will be able to enlighten or understand the Dhamma. So with his compassionate thought, he channels his mind and gaze to someone who is just about to ripen, just about to blossom. And somehow in the Buddha's mind, that person appears. So similarly, in this way, on that morning, Buddha was sitting, early morning, sitting meditation, and with his compassionate thoughts, he was gazing towards the sentient beings. And on that morning, this monk came into his mind and said that Buddha went to speak with him, saying that, how are you doing? And then he immediately told the Buddha that being a monk is so hard, you have to follow so many rules, but if I am a householder, then I don't have to hold so many rules. Just the 5 precepts is good enough. So I'm thinking of giving up a monkhood. So This is, again, I do believe that there are quite a number of monks, when they join the monkhood, initially they may think that being a monk is easy, and being a monk is like nothing to do much. But as soon as they know all these rules, they find themselves like imprisoned, and then with this they don't feel comfortable with being a monk, and leave the monkhood. So similarly, this monk was also facing that. And having heard such stories, then the Buddha said, all right, then what about one thing? If I give you to do one thing, would you be able to do that? And then say, oh, that's fine. If one thing I can do, let me know. And then the Buddha said, well, if you said so, all the rules are so difficult to follow, can you control your mind? So it's called observing your mind and controlling your mind. And then he said, oh, that's simple. So with that, he went on being mindful of his mind, the way he was thinking and how the mind is conditioned. And with that contemplation of his own mind, he was able to control, and he was able to understand that how his mind works. With that understanding, he later on became an arahat, the noble person. So that's why this mind, understanding this mind, is so important and so beneficial. That very moment, once we have fully understood this mind, and fully realize this mind, and having awareness of that, we will not have any attachment to any sort of things, but will be able to let it go. And as I said, letting go is not that you want to let go, but your fully realization of that particular things with the wisdom, and the letting go begins. And with that letting go, the mind becomes purer and purer, and all the conditions just dissolves. And by dissolving all the condition, the consciousness just also dissolve, and attaining the Nibbana. So that's why the the contemplation of the mind, although is a very short part of Satipatthana Sutta, but it's actually the core and important and essential part of the Satipatthana. In order to understand our body, and again, we have to have this mind to be present there. In order to feel this body, again, we have to have this mind to be present there. And again, in order to understand these conditions and how it is arising and vanishing of body or the feelings, again, a mind needs to be there. And with that, again, a mind itself arises and vanishes. In that moment, again, we need to have the so-called pure consciousness, or the higher consciousness, some would say. And this is, again, the observer, clear observer. So observing the entire activities which is happening. And the very moment, once we fully understood, then we will be happier. It is not it is not that we know our body and we are happy. In fact, we need to know our mind. And if you have known the story, it's called a Nakulapita. So Nakulapita was one of the very devoted devotee who normally visits the Buddha every single day. And giving danas, and when he goes to the morning, he takes the food to the temple. When he goes to the temple in the evening, he normally brings something that drinkable to the monks. He never went to the temple empty hands, and he never missed going to the temple, attending the talks that are given by the monks, or attending the discussions in a temple. And with this, he was again going every day. Later, when he became very old, he was feeling that very fragile and unable to walk. and finding very difficult to go to the temple. So one day he went up to the temple and spoke with the Buddha, saying that, Venerable Lord, I am getting very old and finding very difficult to come to the temple. Very difficult to come to the temple. I wonder whether could you guide me to practice at home. Having heard that, the Buddha told Nakulapita that, let this body sick, but not the mind. And that talk, that simple sentence, he listened and just nodded his head. But later, after he left the Buddha, realized what that does mean. What does that means? So then he went to the Sariputta for the further explanation. And that moment, then the Sariputta explained that this body is anicca, the impermanent. It is subject to decay and subject to get pain and subject to, vanish. So accepting this reality and observing it, and then do not let this body makes you feel uncomfortable and make you feel unhappy. Simply knowing this body in this way, but do not let this mind suffer, having attachment and, oh, my body is getting old, now I cannot do this and now I cannot do that, and that sort of a mind. So do not create that sort of the mind. All what you need to do is to be maintaining your mind in the in a good wholesome state and aware, and always be mindful of your mental state, that which mental state you are having. So aware of this mental state is such an important and essential part of the practice. And even when we look at ourselves, the very moment when we realize that we are sad, we see that the whole environment transforms it into the sadness. It doesn't matter how much other peoples are enjoying, but in your view, the whole environment becomes sad. At the same time, when you feel very happy and cheerful, again everything transforms along with that. So that's all created by the mind, and that's in our mind. It's up to us to make it to happy or unhappiness. So that's why the practice of a mindfulness meditation is learn to know that we have a choice to make it happy or unhappiness. And this is also like a teachings of the Buddha. If someone asks you that if you want to be a Buddhist, then and how can I be a Buddhist? Then that is not anyone to make you a Buddhist. It is up to you to be a Buddhist, a real Buddhist or not. So this is DIY. You have a choice to make it happen. And a mindfulness meditation helps us to make that choice, a right choice. And this is all simply because we have been able to understand that how our mind is conditioned, and how our mind is conditioned arises, and how our mind is conditioned vanishes, and how it influences our thinking, how it influences our way of life, and the way we perceive things, the way we behave, and all sort of things comes from our mind. So that's why, with the understanding of this, what happens is that our attitude, the things will change. And the way we see things, the way we perceive things, the way we look at the things, and everything changes. Our attitude will become a more softer and more kind, full of a kindness and compassion with that. So with this attitude has changed, what happens is that our behavior will change it too, and there will be no thought or any behaviors to harm anyone. There will be no thought of taking anything which is not given to us, or even any unethical activities. there is no such things will happen, because of the mind has already grown up. The mind has already in a higher state. So with this, what happens is that the mind, with this, mind is so purer and purer. With this, we will be happier, and this is our choice. We can make it. This is the making or not making is our choice. So that's why this is known as a DIY, and this making of us by ourselves. No one can make it us. No one has got any power over us. It's all up to us. So that's why the Chittanupassana is one of the such an important part that we need to develop. And if you've been practicing meditation, you will understand that how difficult to keep this mind on the object of a meditation. Even just watching the breath for a couple of breaths, mind just goes away. And then after gone away, it's not just gone for a couple of minutes or a couple of moments. Sometimes all 1 hour meditation. And not only that, sometimes you just proliferate on one after another. That's one of the characteristics of mindfulness, is not wobbly, not floating along with the object. Ability to stabilize your concentration or mindfulness on the object. And this is what you will be experiencing. And with that, again, you will be able to know that, gradually as you practice, regular practicing, gradually you will be able to hang on with the object little bit more, longer. And with this hanging on onto the object, what happens is that the wholesome state of the mind, called a kusala chitta, will develop in us. And one by one it develops. And we become more sensitive to any violations, sensitive to any other actions that may bring reactions. And this is all simply because of being mindful. And our mind become more stable and more into the wholesome. And with this, anything that is unwholesome, we will be gradually making it lesser, and then giving up, and then eliminating it, which comes under the right effort. And then ability to eliminate all the defilements and all the unwholesome mental states. With that, good things will arise. Basically, the wholesome activities will generate in us, which starts from giving a dana, practice of a sila. These things will begin gradually. And then as we become accustomed with the practicing and being mindful of our mindset, a condition of our mind, and gradually a good mental state will develop one after another. And with this, we are not living in a heedfulness state of the mind. Very moment when we are not mindful, then we are going into this negligence of our own day-to-day life. So we can check ourselves, how much are we being mindful in our lives, starting from small activities that we normally do. How much are we mindful of it, and how much are we negligent? This is what we can check by ourselves. And this is again the teachings of the Buddha, that don't be negligent. All the sankharas, all the conditioned dhammas are impermanent, and that one we have to understand. And yet, because of the negligence, we forgot to be mindful of our actions, mindful of our speeches, and our even mindset. So this practice of a mindfulness meditation is basically to understand the state of the mind, how mind is conditioned. The very moment once we understood the conditionality of the mind, that which is always dependent on feeling, perception and formation, gradually one after another will be eliminated, and there will be pure consciousness, which leads to the Vijja and Vimutti. Vijja is the wisdom, Vimutti is a liberation. So this practice of the Satipatthana, or this Chittanupassana, the contemplation of the Chitta, is basically to understand the mental state of our own self and then to others, and how does it arises, how does it vanishes, and then later it leads to the complete liberation, attaining the Nibbana. Okay? So continue practicing and understanding the practice of a meditation, that this is to know our own mind. So I offer this as a tonight's reflection. Thank you everyone for listening, and may you all be well and happy. In a few moments time we are going to have a chanting and guided meditation. You're most welcome to join with us. Until then, good night and see you. May the Buddha Dhamma Sangha bless you. Satu.